Welcome to Charts Today. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Tuesday, the 27th of February, comes to you from London, where we're suffering some cold weather at the moment. So we start by looking at the dollar index, just pushing lower. It's below the cloud again, so we are just seeing that dollar turning bearish again, and the euro consequently just turning bullish. Not a great fast transition. It's not a sharp recovery off the bottom, just slowly coming through the cloud. And looking strong again. And Japanese yen, the dollar here is bearish, but actually just rising at the moment. So we're in a bit of a sideways range just for the last few days. And looking at sterling, we're seeing here on the sterling chart that we are above the cloud. We were nudging 143 last month, and we're back to that sort of 141 level yesterday, but just pulling back. So sterling looking a bit stronger there against the dollar, but that's mostly down to dollar weakness because we're seeing sterling weaker against the euro and weak against the Swiss franc, although we are still in a bullish trend there on the short-term cloud chart. Looking at the Australian dollar, we just see sterling pushing a little bit higher there as well. Bitcoin is back above the $10,000 mark and back into a bull trend. So what's interesting here is that the Bitcoin trend was bearish just for a few days after a couple of weeks of bullishness, and we're back into bullish again. So the bearish trend there was short-lived. So we are seeing this recovery looking like it might continue. We've got upside targets to 12,000, so that's 12% upside. So Bitcoin is looking good again. Keep an eye on those 1 minute charts. The S&P 500 index was up very slightly yesterday. Well, I'd say up slightly, up by 1%. So that's looking pretty good as well. The recovery continues, and the Nasdaq also pushing higher. So the recovery there continuing as well, nearly nudging its previous highs. So not much work to do for US tech to get higher. The Dow has a lot of work to do to get back to its highs that we saw in January, but still its recovery is underway as well. And the Russell 2000 is a little bit less recovering, just a little bit less strongly, but it is still undergoing its recovery. Looking at the futures, the S&P futures down 0.25% this morning, so just looking like we might open slightly lower on the US, and the Nasdaq E-mini down by a similar amount. So just looks like the US might open a bit lower today. FTSE 100 is up about 1/3% this morning, so looking better, but still a very weak recovery compared to the US, and the FTSE 250 just ticking higher there as well. So looking like the recovery is underway. The DAX in Germany just fairly flat, so the recovery very different from the US, just fairly flat here. We do have upside targets as high as 3.5% on the DAX. On the short-term chart, but at the moment it's pretty flat. And the CAC 40 in Paris, similarly slow recovery. The Japanese market, we're seeing here, Japan is actually just recovering, looking like we're going to regain that bullish medium-term chart. The short-term chart is now bullish. An absence of upside targets on the short term, but we do have a 6.3% upside on the medium term. Hang Seng was down nearly 1% overnight, and the Chinese market, the local Chinese market, was also down about 1%. The Australian market just down about 0.25% or 2.2%, so just struggled a little bit. Sorry, that was the Indian market, and the Australian market was actually up slightly. So interesting, just looking at that, the Sensex in India, it is just recovering, but it's a slower recovery than most markets. Taking a look at Brent crude sitting at $67. It's very much in the bull trend at the moment. Shortage of upside targets on the short-term charts. The medium term, we've got quite a few, and WTI sitting at 63.72. So the spread is around $4 at the moment, but we're seeing here that is just rising gradually, and we have got upside targets here to 68 and 67 roughly. So about 5 or 7% upside potential there. US nat gas fairly flat yesterday, sitting at $2.67. In the doldrums, really. In the medium and long-term charts, looking very bearish. The short-term chart just turned bullish again, but it's a really choppy trade in sideways markets there. Taking a look at gold, gold recovered slightly the last couple of days. It is back into the bull trend, but we really do need to now get above this sort of 1360 level to break out. Sooner or later that's going to happen. We can now, with a triangle, we can see that it won't be long in 2018 that we will see that breakout. if it is going to break to the upside, and this ascending triangle suggests we will do that. And silver also looking more bullish as well. The US 10-year bond yield sitting at 2.87%. We were as high as 2.95% last week. We're still in a bear trend here short term, but markets expecting, and we're seeing these targets here on the long-term chart of 3.05%. Apple continues its recovery, looking bullish, and nudging its highs that we saw in January, so nearly fully recovered. Amazon actually pushing higher yesterday to make a new high. So we're seeing here Amazon actually taking out the high that we saw in January, making a new all-time high. That's the sort of behavior that we want to see for these tech stocks to be convinced that they are fully recovered. Remember, if we can break the previous high, then that's in Dow theories, a higher high is really important. Alphabet has more work to do. Facebook did perform quite well yesterday and is back into the mid 180s, showing signs that it found support on the cloud and looking strong. And last of all, Microsoft looking strong, continuing on that uptrend, not quite yet taking out the January high, but very, very close to it. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.